Now, another recent decision that occurred, I'd be very interested to hear your comment on this, is that the Supreme Court ruled that it was, I guess, constitutional or legal to actually provide support for the corporations to, I guess, lobby Congress. And I didn't foresee that there was any limitations on this, and this would seem to endorse the current system we have, which seems to be a real challenge to the average citizen, and that it allows large multinational corporations like the drug companies to essentially effectively lobby Congress and have legislation passed that really benefits the corporation and not the average citizen.
Well, the ruling that they made had to do with spending money for an election, whether a corporation could spend money on their own to help elect somebody. It didn't have to do so much with lobbying. But I take a position on the lobbying that you should never restrict lobbying, because the Constitution is rather clear about the people being allowed to petition Congress, and whether you're an individual or you belong to a group, if you're a national right-to-work group or a right-to-life group or a gun group or a special interest group, the issue of petitioning, you should be allowed to do that. So I don't want to write any restrictions on the right of people to come. And then you say, what you're going to do is just allow the status quo to be maintained, the special interest control Congress. Well, there's a couple things we could do. One, we could have more people in Congress that wouldn't be influenced by the special interests. If you had a lot of people with high character in Washington, the lobbyists wouldn't mean anything. They would come and nobody would listen to them. But that, of course, takes a transition and get better people in Congress. The ultimate answer to this is not to ever have government so big that it's passing out these favors, and then there wouldn't be an incentive. If the money didn't first go to Washington and everybody wants to get some of their money back, and they were just there for very minimal reasons, there would be no incentives to spend these hundreds and hundreds of millions, of dollars to lobby congressmen. On the ruling, they said that corporations can spend money. Obama the other night indicated that meant foreign corporations could spend money, but he misinterpreted that. It meant domestic corporations can spend money for campaigning. My immediate reaction is similar to the lobbyists. Well, it's the corporation's money. They raise their money. They can spend the money any way they want. And if government weren't so big, then they couldn't be, buying anything, and this wouldn't be a great influence. But the whole issue of freedom, it was they considered this a First Amendment issue, and that the campaign laws were too strict, saying that 60 days before an election, if you're a corporation, you weren't allowed to put an ad on, say, vote for Joe Jones, he's a good guy. But one side will argue, well, corporations don't have rights, only individuals have rights. Well, individuals own the corporations, and it's not so easy as saying that. But generally the liberals saying, well, don't ever let a corporation spend any money. But when you think about it, what about a newspaper? They're a corporation. What about a TV station? They're a corporation. What if the TV station is biased? I mean, this is all free publicity. And even when the law was in there that said the corporations couldn't spend any money, the newspapers could endorse candidates and TV stations. I mean, they're both on right and left, and some are real left-wingers, and they support all the liberal Democrats, and the right stations support conservative Republicans. So it already exists out there, so I can't see how they can limit corporate funds for one group but not the other. I want to limit government, and then we wouldn't have these kind of problems.
I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate your observation and recommendation to really have a fundamental influence on this would be change the people who are in the government. And I believe that we are making progress in that, as demonstrated by this massive shift in Massachusetts, a traditionally Democratic state, and the people voiced their opinion and they were heard. So we can make a difference, and you've made a difference. Your Revolution campaign last year, and then our site. I mean, last year was one of the single most important. 80% of the American public say no to an unsatisfactorily tested H1N1 vaccine. So 80% of the public said no. So people can make a difference. And I'm wondering if there's any specific recommendations you might have for people who feel strongly and share similar passions to identify and support specific politicians so that they can get into Congress? Or there's any other broad recommendations you have to make a shift in the system?
Well, the ultimate change in the system comes when there's a philosophic change. In Washington today, they talk about compromise, coming together, get the Republicans to talk to this Democrats and work out some arrangement. But really, I don't see that as the issue, as right ideas and wrong ideas. They're in Washington, the leadership on both parties endorse the same principles of government. They both support the idea that you print money when you need it. They both support the position that we have an obligation to police the world and go to war without declaring war. Both of them have supported the position that we don't have to be strict on protecting civil liberties. We can, arrest people and actually assassinate people at will. And it's just only management of government intervention. That's the only argument. None of them truly, in leadership, want to get rid of the income tax, and that's one position. Income tax is the other position. They always say, well, who's going to get penalized the most? Everybody for the bailout. Some people want one company bailed out, and somebody other company wants bailed out. So I think people have to understand that standing firm on a principle and understanding why the founders were so clear on the role of government, and people should be self-educated as to our history, what liberty really means, how the free market works, why sound money is important, and then argue that case. And then there's always a job for them if they are determined, if they understand the issues well enough, they will find somebody or something to do, and it may be in politics, it may be in education, or who knows what. But we need a larger number of people being involved in first studying and implementing these ideas whichever way they can.
Well, thank you for those recommendations, because ultimately that's what's going to make the difference, is that each individual becoming philosophically committed to these principles and then taking action so that we can get good people in representing us. Now, I just wanted to bring the conversation back to healthcare again, and it seems that some type of healthcare bill is going to be passed. The specifics, of course, remain to be seen. But more than likely, the bill that is ultimately passed and materialized is going to be supporting, for the most part, the traditional, conventional view on health, which is really much subsidizing the drug care companies and the conventional approaches. And to me, that seems somewhat tragic, and perhaps the biggest misguidance in the whole process, in that there's not a strong attention being paid to prevention, such as simple measures as identifying and measuring and optimizing people's vitamin D levels, which can radically improve health, and increasing omega-3 fats, and eliminating toxins that are simple things like high fructose corn syrup, which is the most commonly consumed source of calories in the U.S. I'm wondering what the chances are of, or perhaps recommendations, but how these types of influences or shifts might occur from your perspective. What's the best way to seek to introduce these into really a government mandate, what appears to be a government mandate?
Yeah, well, this is a big problem because the drug companies are so powerful, and they don't want people to have other choices, and they want to control whether it's immunizations or vitamins or nutritional products, the whole works. They kept talking about, the big option, the public option, and I kept thinking, well, why aren't they more worried about the private option? Why can't we all have a private option, paying for all our own medical care and maybe having a tax credit for the money we spend, and it will be out of the way? I mean, if, let's say, half of us would say, yeah, if you give me a tax credit and I spend my own money on what I want, then I can do it in holistic type of medicine, I can do it in conventional medicine, if I get hurt, I can take care of it. But no, they never talk about that, and I think it has a lot to do with the drug companies, because they have a great deal of influence on how legislation is passed. But whether I even have a bill I introduced that we have a private option for money, legalize the Constitution, let people use gold and silver. I think the post office should have true competition. I think public schools should always have the option of private schools and homeschooling. In medicine, that's exactly what we need. I don't want the government telling anybody which type of medicine they want, but I want the government to get out of the way so that people can freely pick and choose and express themselves, and that anybody who's promoting certain alternative medicines and other treatments that they have a right to do it, and they're never curtailed by government rules and regulation, and that's where I see a lot of hindrance being placed today.